You're listening to Trek FM.
Hi folks, and welcome to this week's edition of Trek News and Views. And this week we're going to be delving into all realms of possibilities because we're going to be talking about Star Trek Discovery. What we know, what we don't know, what we think we know, what we hope we know, and we'll probably make some stuff up as well. Because after all, it is Trek News and Views, and that's what we do. Steve's here again because he's a glutton for punishment. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
And also, we have two first-time people on the podcast. So, first of all, we have from the north of England, we have Paul. Hi, Paul.
Good evening. How are we?
We're very good. How's things in the north?
In the north, up north, it's fabulous up here. Beautiful day today.
No, it's the north. You're not supposed to have sun. You're supposed to have rain.
Well, yeah, we'll get that tomorrow, probably.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Every time I talk to Kieran, it's raining, so there you go.
Yeah, you have to keep drying out the whippets. That's the only problem.
Just put them in a Dyson Airblade, they'll be fine. And also, originally from Wales, for those of you abroad, that's on the left-hand side of England as you're looking at the globe. We have Donya. Hi, Donya.
Hi.
So, Donya, can you tell people a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump back to Paul, and he can tell people a little bit about himself.
Sure. What would you like to know specifically?
Well, you can plug your other podcasts and your blog, and just tell us basically how you got into Star Trek.
Okay, so I write for a website called hyperbole.com. It's a entertainment website that basically, when you write for them, you have to be a huge fan of what you're writing about. That's one of their kind of rules for writing for them. So I do articles, features, in-depth stuff for fandoms that I love. I podcast regularly. Unfortunately for the dark side of the other Star franchise, so I do a weekly Star Wars podcast as well. And I
What's that?
It's called Resistance Radio.
No, I mean, what's Star Wars?
Oh, Star Wars. I don't know. It's just this other thing that happens in space sometimes.
It's called
right.
Stargate, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought that was Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, so I do that one, and I also do a superhero adaptation podcast as well called Hero Hype. And that's also a weekly podcast, but we've been on a little bit of a break because one of the other hosts got a summer job. So we're getting back into that, though, now that she's back on regular hours. But yeah, I guess kind of been a Star Trek fan for as long as I can remember, because my dad was a pretty big Star Trek fan. So I grew up with like Next Generation on all the time. Yeah, so it was always on in the background, and then obviously as I got a little bit older, I started exploring like the original series and getting into that, and then everything else, like all the movies, and I just kind of followed it all the way through then, just because sci-fi was always something that fascinated me as a kid, so it's how I ended up into Star Wars, and Stargate, funnily enough, also was really into that, and pretty much anything that was in space and had a ship, I was watching as a kid. So yeah,
that's me. If it had a spaceship and it had star somewhere in the title, chances are I watched it. So
yeah.
So, and we're fine with the dark side on here, you know. Yeah. I quite like it. You know, the dark side has cookies, so I'm good with that.
That's Wookiees, not cookies.
Can have a Wookiee bring me a cookie. So, Paul, tell people a little bit about yourself then.
Okay, so I'm probably a little bit older than you guys, so I can remember the original series of Star Trek the first time round. I not actually live, but a few years after on reruns, early 70s, watching it with my dad, as pretty much everybody that I hear about here on podcasts say exactly the same thing. So there's a lot of fathers out there in their 70s at the moment who've got a lot to answer for. But yeah, watching it with my dad on Saturday mornings or Saturday evenings, whenever it was on, then really got into it, like, as Colin says, anything with a starship in it, anything set in space, it's futuristic. You've got to watch it. So did that, and then as time goes by, we get into the next generation of Star Trek, and that was exciting because that was the first new series of Star Trek, and watched all of that. Really, really loved it, and of course it just grew from there, really, because we went through the glory years of the 80s and 90s of having 2, maybe 3 types of Star Trek on at the same time with reruns and repeats. Absolutely fabulous times. Then I unfortunately when I got married, so you have to stop watching TV and have kids and things and do stuff like that. So
unfortunately, I got married. Does your wife listen to your podcast?
she does, and she's heard me say this before. So yeah,
Mine doesn't.
Yeah, I'll just close this door a bit more so she can't hear me. But no, it's
all right. I'm texting her as we speak. You're fine.
Yeah, hey, I'll get her number anyway. Yeah, so I mean, I must admit, I totally missed Enterprise when it came out, but I've caught up with that in recent years, and yeah, I mean that's basically my background. I've been to a few conventions in the mid-90s, and obviously the Destination Star Trek a couple of years ago.
And you do a podcast.
And a podcast is putting it mildly. 2 podcasts, maybe.
Is that all?
Yeah.
So Steve's a podcast tour. He's on anything with a mic.
Yes. So yeah, we did the. I'm one of the hosts on the 10 Forward podcast, and I also have my own Sci-Fi Waffle podcast, which we talk generally about anything to do with science fiction.
Yeah, and 1 or 2 tangents.
Maybe 1 or 2 tangents. I mean, 10 Forward, you'd think, obviously, that's a Star Trek podcast, isn't it? I mean, you wouldn't hear us talking about the top 10 sports stars or Battlestar Galactica or Babylon 5 or anything like that at all.
No. And you wouldn't do a podcast that's so long it takes you 3 episodes to put it out.
Well, our 200th was so special, and we wanted to be memorable. And I think it's still going on now. It went into 3 hours of recording, so we had to put it out as 2 separate podcasts.
Is that all?
We're going for the record now. I think 201 is on day 4, part 3 or something. So yeah.
So you grew up watching TOS. I would like to point out, by the way, that unlike every other podcaster, that's Paul's reference, I did not watch Star Trek with my dad. In fact, I didn't watch Star Trek with anyone in my family because I'm the only one in my family that likes science fiction. So, go me. So, Paul, so you grew up with TOS. Is that your favourite incarnation then?
Do you know what? It's certainly up there at the top. I think that has sentimental value because obviously I watched it when I was a lot younger, a lot more immature. I didn't really understand the subtleties of it. I just liked it because it had starships and lasers in it. TNG is always where my heart is because that really is what Star Trek is about for me. It's about all being a big family, all getting together, working together to defeat the common enemy. Whereas, let's say Deep Space Nine, everybody's arguing with each other and there's politics involved and all sorts of things. Voyager was good. It was more like going back to that sort of thing, but they were all like against each other, but reluctantly fighting with each other. So I do prefer the Next Generation.
What about you, Donya? Is TNG your favourite?
Yeah, I would probably say that Next Generation is going to be my favorite, mostly because that is the one that I grew up with start to finish, pretty much. Almost start to finish. Like, it was reruns to start with, and then I was old enough to see it when it came to an end, and it was 94, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 94. It came out the year before I was born, so which was 87. So, yeah, I would say that one is probably my favorite just because it's the one I grew up with and the one I feel the closest connection to. Again, the things that I love about it is the same, that it's a big, kind of huge family in space, and it was so much about the humanity of them in these amazing kind of locations. And But when I went back to the original series, which admittedly I did like when I was slightly older, like coming into my teenage years, it was fun. But then when I rewatched it again when I was older still, I started appreciating it for what it meant when it originally came out, because it broke ground in so many amazing ways. So I also have a huge respect for the original series as well. So out of them all, probably those
Which is
two.
a nice segue into this. This series is actually set before TOS, but after Enterprise. So it's 10 years before TOS. And there's a few things that we do know because Bryan Fuller's revealed them. So one of the things we do know is when it's set. The other thing we do know is obviously the ship, because it's the title of the show. So what do you people feel about, first of all, when it's set, and second of all, the ship? Although we do have to emphasise that Bryan Fuller said the ship is a work in progress.
Well, not just about when it's set, we know which universe it's set in, because it's in the Prime universe, not the Kelvin universe.
Yeah, that means no lens flare.
I don't really mind when it's set. In a way, if it's set a lot earlier, when there's a lot less technology, as long as they don't do what they did in Enterprise, which was start having stuff appearing what in a way seemed a little bit too early on some things, it's good, because it means you can't just get out of it with a whole bunch of technobabble. It's going to be more about the people. It's going to be a lot more character-based. So I think it should be good. But the thing with Star Trek is it's so vast, covers so many different timelines, and if you even just look to the books, you've got so many different stories and how they all interconnect and everything else. You can really start anywhere, and you can like it, and it's going to be a brand new cast. They said if they do include somebody, it's not going to be until season 2, for sort of like references and sort of look backs and things like that. So maybe someone from Enterprise era. So yeah, it's going to be nice that it's going to be more standalone and not continuing on too much from what's come before.
What about you, Donya?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with the place that it's going to be set. You know, I always felt like I wanted to see a little bit more wrap up to Enterprise in a more satisfactory way. So it kind of coming between Enterprise and the original series is going to be good, because at least it'll kind of build off some of the stuff that maybe we didn't see when Enterprise came to an end, but also it's going to build up to what we know from the original series. So it's in a really interesting kind of place where there's some interesting things going on in that time period that Bryan Fuller has put it in. But in the same way, I'd kind of hope to see it still moving forward in respect to like maybe seeing it set after some of the other series. So I think they've got scope to do some really interesting things, but it's Bryan Fuller. I pretty much trust what he's gonna do, almost implicitly. Like, I love him as a show creator. I think he does some amazing stuff. So it probably didn't matter where it was gonna end up for me. I think he's gonna do a fantastic show regardless.
Yeah, because you just need to look at what Bryan Fuller did with like Dead Like Me, and the characters and the interactions they had with each other in that sort of series. And if it's anything like that, then I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I think I was quite happy that it wasn't post-Voyager, because I was a bit concerned about where they would take the technology. How futuristic could you make something look without going too unbelievable? I know we're talking about science fiction here, but it's got to be kept believable in some respects. And post Voyager, you'd be looking. What could you do? Instead of having flat screens, would you have holograms? Would you? How would you do that? And where would you take it after that? So the fact that they've put it before or after Enterprise and before TOS puts it into a place where they can still have believable technology and believable science fiction without it going too silly. The other thing is, of course, with it being 10 years before TOS, they've given themselves enough room that if it does become popular and they get up to 7 years, they're still 3 years away from TOS, so they won't overlap into that era. So I like where it's set. It also gives you the ability to play around with characters, as you said. With you could bring in people from Enterprise. You could have Admiral Archer hanging around, or you could have Kirk's dad or Spock's mum or whoever you want. So there is a possibility of moving people in and out of that area. The only thing that you do hinder yourself slightly with is alien races that you've seen already in TOS or further on. You can't bring them in too early without doing something stupid like Enterprise, where you can say, well, I wonder who those funny-looking guys with the big heads and big ears were. Oh, Ferengi. Oh, yeah, well, we can't say we've met them already because they might be bumped into in the future. And so it's got to be careful with what they do, but I'm quite confident and quite happy with the people who are steering this ship, if you pardon the pun, that they are going to put it in the right direction. And I'm really excited about this. I'm more excited about this series coming up than I ever was about Star Trek Beyond.
Actually, the Ferengi Enterprise episode, Bryan and Bragger actually admitted in the chat that it was a desperate throw of the dice because they needed an episode, and that's where that episode came from. So, and the backlash from the fans was incredible. It was more, the backlash from that was bigger than the backlash from when they had revealed the Romulan cloak ships. So, that was his threshold moment in Enterprise, I think.
But luckily there were enough new races introduced in Enterprise which weren't mentioned in TOS or any other iteration of Star Trek that could be expanded on. So, yeah, you do have all these other sort of alien races that we can sort of include. So there is at least that.
But the thing that I like Paul said, if it runs for 7 years, then I'll still be 3 years away from TOS. But then that does lead in the 7th year, if they do want to set up, by then the J.J. Calvin films will probably be finished. So it does give them the chance to set up a new TOS, so to speak. So you could have at the end of this, at 7 years, you could have James T. Kirk going to the Academy. Or in season 5, you could have George Kirk show up. So the possibilities for where this could go in the timeline that it's fitted in are astronomical. And also the fact that you could have Sarek could show up in this because Romulans, Vulcans live 200 years, which means you could have Spock as a little child show up in this. There's just so much they can do that they may not need to do, but the possibilities are just fantastic. So, well, what about the ship? What do you think of the ship design? Because I did put a meme out on the Trek News and Views Twitter account that it's basically a D7 mating with a Constitution class, and it's like do you want to get jiggy with the D7, and out comes this ship?
It's definitely an interesting design, and you can see where it's been taken from the Phase 2 sketches and designs. But yeah, it does look very close to, in TOS, what you saw from the Romulans and the Klingons. And as they haven't, especially the Klingons, you haven't really done much with them. And even the Romulans, at that particular time, you got the war, but you'd wonder why you'd have a design similar to what was really the enemy. But they have actually said that this is not the final design. This was just something that was quickly bashed up to release as a teaser.
Yeah, well, Fuller actually did a press conference a couple of weeks ago, it's like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he actually said the nacelles have changed already. So it is very fluid still.
Yeah.
I think he mostly just wanted something to take to San Diego Comic-Con to just show people, to be like, hey, we're working on this. This is... Get excited with us because we've started, like, really pulling everything together and we're really ramping up production now. I mean, I don't dislike it as much as I have possibly seen around online. Because I really like that it kind of throws back to those original designs, to those sketches and everything. Like, so I kind of like that in a way. I'm also glad that it's an ongoing design process, because for me it was the rendering and the finishing on it that kind of threw me off the most, in that it didn't look like a ship I would have come to expect from the Star Trek universe. It was that kind of goldish color to it that was really odd to me. But as for like throwing out the idea that it looks very much like a Klingon design, buried in like a TV Line article, and I've not seen anyone corroborate this information at all. Right at the bottom was one of their writers started throwing around that the captain of the Discovery may potentially be a Klingon. So I don't know if that might come into play with the design of the ship at all. And I don't know how legitimate that information is, because that's the only place I've seen it. So
Yeah, because I suppose around that time is the 4 Years' War has sort of happened. So it could be part of this sort of treaty where they have a combined ship of Federation and Klingon crew.
Yeah. It's in that kind of time frame. Depending on how strictly, I guess, you stick to Fuller's comments that it's 10 years before. Like, if you go exactly 10 years before, there's not really much happening. But if you play around a little bit, if you treat it as like a loose estimate of time instead, there's a lot more interesting stuff happening around that date.
They've got to breach the design between the NX and the Enterprise of Kirk's era. They've got to do that gap. Now, an easy way to look at it, which this is what I was saying to someone the other day, an easy way to look at it is when they did the Enterprise C, the brief that they had for the C was it's got to look somewhere between the B and the D. So it has to have characteristics of the B, but look like it's moving towards the D. So they've got to have that kind of fluidity. It's got to be similar to Enterprise, but it's got to look like it's moving towards Kirk's Enterprise. So, when he says it's a work in motion, that's what I'm thinking as. So it wouldn't surprise me to see like the engineering sections trimmed down a bit. So it does look like it's that transition period. And if you've seen the NX Enterprise remodel, which was going to be in season 5, you can actually see it moving more towards the Constitution class.
Yeah, I think this the Discovery does look as though it's in between, as you say, Carl, the NX-01 and moving towards Kirk's era of ships. When I first saw it, I thought it was very angular. It's not as smooth and as rounded as any of the other ships that we've seen in the Star Trek universe. But there's only two issues I really had with it when I first saw it. Is one, it's brown, and two, it looks like a roulette wheel. So I just but the overall shape is pretty much a standard Star Trek shape. It's got two nacelles, it's got a main body, it's got a saucer. So yeah, it's instantly recognisable as a Star Trek ship, which I think they really wanted to keep so that people who haven't seen it before can get the idea of get that feel of it being a Star Trek thing. But it's just that the saucer section looks really, really strange. You have windows on the outside of the rim which look very strange. Where the ball would be rolling around in the roulette wheel, you've got windows looking in and out of that section, so you wouldn't get much of a view from there. But other than that, I didn't really have that much of an issue with the ship. I don't know.
The thing is, the windows are actually tilted upwards slightly because it's at like a 45-degree angle. It's almost like in Deep Space Nine, some of the window views you may have got in there. So it gives people an outlook to what's happening outside the ship. Because
maybe they're all just nosy sods, and the people on the outside of the circle are peeping on the people on the inside of the circle, and vice versa.
Yeah, could be.
But I'm never going to look at that now without thinking of a roulette wheel. So cheers for that.
It would only be better if there was actually a big ball rolling around it.
Yeah, or if the one square was painted red, the next one black, the next one red, the next one black.
Big zero on it.
So yeah, well, I can see where they're going, but yeah, I do hope that the final version, the saucer section, is a bit more sensible, shall we say? Because even from aesthetics aside, I would imagine that the modular section where the bridge sits on top of, I would have thought that would have been a weak point. So, unless every part of the roulette wheel is an escape pod.
Yeah, with its own individual ball.
Yeah. You need something to do while you're finding a planet.
well, the thing is that wouldn't be part of the ship design because, well, even in when it came to like Beyond, one of the things they covered in there is because of the Kelvin incident where they didn't have escape pods. You've then got the Kelvin pods, which they talk about. So the ships didn't come. It's a bit like with the Titanic; it didn't have enough sort of things for escaping. It would have just been sort of shuttlecraft.
Yeah, well, if you take Star Trek 09, there was no escape pods; it was all the shuttles.
Yeah,
and we know. I don't think we don't know. We don't ever see a TOS era, even when they have to when the transporter's down and stuff like that. They use the shuttles.
Yeah, there's never any mention of any sort of escape pod or anything else like that. So, to me, I don't think there would be anything like that in this ship because there's never anything that said, even in Enterprise, there's never any mention of anything to do with escape pods. Basically, if the ship went down, they had to get it fixed.
Yeah, as evidenced in the Xindi War when it was getting torn apart.
Mm.
And they had to stick with it. They had to fix the ship. They had no choice.
So, yeah, escape pods wouldn't be something I'd expect to see in this ship, so that wouldn't be part of the design.
Donya, you mentioned the variety of species. Is there a species that you were hoping to see on the ship?
Probably an Andorian. I would like to see that. I mean, honestly, I would just like to see. I would like to see a more diverse crew in the respect that I would like to see species that we know and maybe species that we don't know or haven't seen yet, or maybe have only seen briefly, like kind of explored a little bit more. But like Andorians, I would love to. I mean, they're one of the founders of the Federation and we don't know a massive amount about them. So I'd like to see them explored a lot more. So it would be great if there was a crew member.
It would also be good if they've got Andorians, is to also include at least one Anar. Because they are so different, and with their extra telepathic abilities, having them as part of the crew and sort of them not wanting as much in the way of sort of light and things, it'd definitely make it interesting on how sort of the cohabitation would be with all these other species at that point.
I'd like to see a Tellarite.
Yeah.
Because, the thing that I always thought was missing was we know the founding members of the Federation. We know who they are. And it would be fitting to see a crew that had the founding members of the Federation on it. So an Andorian and a Tellarite to me would be, this is the bold new world. This is after Archer, so the Federation planet has been formed, the treaties have been signed. So to me, it would make sense that you would have representatives of the founding species on board.
I would love that, especially on a ship called Discovery as well. Like, that would be great.
Absolutely, I think I'd love to see Andorians on here. I'd love to see Caitians as well. That'd be cool. And if you read I take it you guys have read some of the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's obviously in the books they can do a lot more because they have a better budget for the graphics. You've also got, and I can't remember the character's name now, but in the Titan series alone, just on that ship, there's so many different types of species. Now, when I said types, I mean you got one that's almost like a dinosaur, has a long tail.
Oh, Dr. Ray
is possibly one of them, yes. But I know there's been talk of robots coming into it a bit more. So that could be, and when I say robots, I mean, what do we mean by robots rather than androids? Or do we mean maybe, androids? You'd have to go with robots, I suppose, because androids are a little bit later, developed a bit later in the timeline. So,
well, androids are in TOS.
Yes.
Which is conveniently forgotten in TNG, but androids are in TOS.
I think Kirk actually makes a reference about robots in one episode and Discovery. Somebody said, because I think there's an episode of TOS where a person's got this AI robot, and I think what they said is Kirk makes a reference, didn't they have one of those on, or something like that on the Discovery? Which is where I wonder where the name may have come from, because I don't remember that when I recently just did my watch of TOS. But if that is true, then I wonder if that's where the name came from.
See, the thing you've got to watch with robots is, as we know from TOS, that if you put a robot by Kirk, he'll talk it to death.
Yeah, he starts talking, he'll go bitty 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 bitty.
But yeah, I mean, the robots could be something as simple as maintenance robots like R2D2.
Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be an android because then they're going into different ground. The fact that he said robot and not android, to me, brings up a whole different thing. It could be humanoid in shape, but not like the TOS androids, so to speak. So it doesn't have like flesh appearance and stuff like that. You're basically seeing like a C3PO type of robot. But I took that as like, maybe they're going down the R2D2 route then with a maintenance robot or, protocol droids and stuff like that. Because the other thing you have to consider as well is, although the universal translator was being developed in Enterprise, it wasn't perfected. So if you've got a robot that's programmed like a protocol droid, then that would negate the universal translator.
Well, the species that I would like to see is a Deltan, because they're mentioned in Enterprise.
Oh, I can't think why.
But no, it's just they've got sort of special abilities, but it's just something different. Their interactions with the crew would be quite interesting.
And especially because they give off the pheromone, don't they?
Yeah.
So that could open a whole can of worms.
Plus, aren't they able to heal injuries and things?
Yeah, they can heal injuries. They give off a pheromone which can make people attracted to them of any sex. It's not just exclusive male, female, female, male, and something like that. And they also have was it the natural navigators or something like that?
So yeah, I'm just looking it up. Actually, it's pain relieving abilities. It's not healing abilities.
Well, that could still help if you've got a bad headache.
But yeah, it definitely, especially as something that's going to be very character based, it would make an interesting sort of way to sort of deal with interactions with the crew.
And that would fill the navigator slot because that is their one of their traits, isn't it?
So, but yeah, I suppose there's just so many. We could just go through a list, and it's just like, yeah.
But the other thing is you've got to consider is how much of the universe is actually explored at the time of Discovery, because the NX-01 was the first Warp 5 ship. It wasn't the first Warp ship. Okay, I have to keep pointing out to God knows how many people. It was the first Warp 5 ship.
Yeah.
So they started exploring, but they started out using the Vulcan star charts. So they weren't exploring anything new at the beginning. And I did look this up, and I noticed that in an episode of TNG called The Dauphin, Wesley actually states they've explored 19% of the galaxy. So between Archer and Picard, they've only explored 19% of the galaxy.
Which is quite funny when you consider the amount of times in TOS that they mention about going to the boundaries of the galaxy. It's just like, well, that doesn't quite match. But yeah, it's just when you, because I've just recently watched TOS. So when you look at that and sort of like going above warp 10, and so much of what happened in TOS in some respects has actually been retconned in later series.
Is the TOS episode, is it when they do warp 13 or 14 in the TOS episode?
Yeah, they do it a couple of times.
So which negates going past warp 10 in Voyager, but because no one turned into a salamander.
Some people sort of get around it by saying, oh, well, they just had a different way of measuring it.
They did actually retcon that in the book, didn't they? They actually said that because the TNG episode when Riker's Galaxy Dreadnought can do warp 14, and they says it's because they changed the way that they measure warp.
Yeah, it's like going from miles to kilometres sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very sneaky. So
yeah, we're Trekkies. We can find a way to explain most things.
Yeah, that was Voyager, Technobabble of the Week. Paul, what do you think about the focus not being on the captain?
I think that's a bold move, and I think it's if you look at the likes of the Next Generation, the person who had all the most exploring to do was actually the first officer. The captain was stuck on the ship, and he wasn't allowed to leave the ship. Obviously, Riker was saying, no, you stay there, I'll go down, beam down, take an away team. So he gets all the adventures. It doesn't mean to say that Picard doesn't. Obviously, he overrules Riker now and again and goes on his own adventures. But if that's really as it should be, and I think even in Kirk's era, he shouldn't have been the one jumping off the ship and running around and having all the adventures. Although that's obviously for dramatic reasons in the show itself. But really, the captain is the most important person. He should stay on the ship, and therefore the first officer should be the one that goes down to do things, unless it's a really top level diplomatic mission, in which case you'd need the captain. So to focus on other members of the crew, I think is a great idea. I think if you see Lower Decks on TNG, that was one of the better episodes because you found out what the normal people do. Well, obviously, when we talk about Star Trek and we talk about the crew, we're really talking about the top brass, the managers, the officers. What you don't see is all of the people who are actually running the ship. They're doing the day-to-day physical work, keeping the engines going, keeping the phasers ready, loading the torpedoes as it would be in those times. Even if you see Scotty in the original series, he's just basically a manager of a number of people beneath him. So yeah, it'd be great to see other characters being the main focus, and that way you don't have to focus on one person. You could have a number of episodes where they focus on an individual, which they do anyway. If you look at the first season of TNG or even Voyager or DS9, the first 7 or 8 episodes focuses on one individual each time. There's a story that builds their character a little bit or introduces their character. So with only 13 episodes, you could spend the whole season doing that. Focus on one individual with subplots of the others and the main story running through it. So I've got no problem with it. I think it's a different way of doing things. It's a clever way of doing things, and it stops it from becoming just a standard Star Trek series. This one becomes a little bit different.
As you mentioned Lower Decks, but that wasn't the only one, because there was Voyager where you got, was it the Good Shepherd? Because that was a sort of Lower Decks one where you get to meet crew that aren't really at the top of their game, which was a little bit different. There was more about learning and getting them out of their shell. But also with Voyager, you'd also got, it wasn't all about the captain, because from, season 4, you got Jerry Ryan as 7 of 9, and it almost became the 7 of 9 show, really. So it wasn't all about the captain with that one. So it's not saying that's new to Star Trek either, but it looks like they're going more that way, which when people talk about the Lower Decks, it's always sort of one of the sort of favourite among the fans is sort of all that interactions with the crew, because that episode, and that it's very character driven. It's not sort of action all the time.
Yeah, I never took it that it was a first officer really, because it's a lieutenant commander. So I took it as someone more akin to like Data.
Yeah.
What do you think about it, Donya? And also the fact that it's going to be a female lead.
I mean, I'm always glad to see more females getting leading roles especially in sci-fi stuff. And Star Trek's always been really good for that, for having really great, nuanced, interesting female characters. So it's great to see that tradition continue as well. Star Trek have been very, very good about, I guess, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. But I'm really excited to see more of a focus on what we would think of as like lower decks of a ship, because I love the bridge crews. I do really like learning about the captains and how they interact with the rest of their crew. Like, it's such a fascinating relationship that they have, but I think it'll be nice to see it the other way around, and having the whole series be focused on that, rather than like one-off episodes here and there where they shift the perspective. And I don't know, I'm really interested to see how they'll pull it off, because it's not something that we've seen in a sustained way in a Star Trek show before. So I think Bryan Fuller's the right guy to do it as well, because he's so character driven. So doing it this way around makes a lot of sense for like his strengths and how he writes and how he directs and how he works on a show. So it's really playing to his strengths quite a lot as well.
Do you think that strength will work with the gay character as well?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think actually having an out queer character on a Star Trek show has been a long time coming. I mean, Roddenberry himself wanted a queer character of some kind in Next Generation, and I believe he did an interview with The Advocate at one point, like not that long before, or was it The Humanist? It might have been The Humanist, but it was not that long before he passed away, where he was saying like his attitude towards homosexuality changed so much, and he realized in himself like the way that he had viewed people who were homosexual and the way that he looked at them was inherently different, and he'd been preaching a whole universe of being inclusive, and he'd kind of given off the impression of being thoughtless in that particular area. So it was something that he wanted to bring into Next Generation, which was in the 5th season, I think, at that point, because that would have been 1991 or so. So I think it's something that's just it's been a long time coming, and Bryan Fuller is very inclusive. You look at any of his shows and you can tell, like, even just look at Hannibal. If you've watched Hannibal, for example, he's very much into portraying that, but he's often been tied by networks for what he can and can't show. So the fact that he's been given the freedom to actually push forward with being able to show a gay character, I think that's a great thing, because it's before Sulu in the Kelvin timeline, we haven't had an established gay character in the Star Trek.
The closest
universe.
We got to it was Jadzia Dax in DS9.
Yeah, but
that wasn't that was just one of her personalities. That wasn't that she was a lesbian.
Yeah. So
thing is, in an interview with the official Star Trek podcast, Engage, George Takei, I think it was in that interview, mentioned that he had actually talked to Gene Roddenberry about a gay character in TOS, but basically said he would like to have done something, but just the fact that with the first interracial kiss, they lost more than half of their viewership because the networks in the south of the US refused to even show it. And it would, if that happened again, it would mean the possibility of them being cut and things like that.
First interracial kiss on American TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we did it first.
Yeah. We do most things first, but it just gets forgotten about in history. But yeah, he had to be very careful with how he went about.
I don't mean like literally we did it. Just point that out.
Some of us weren't alive.
Yeah, Paul was.
Oh, I remember seeing it. It's horrible.
But yeah, it was something that Gene said he would have wanted to have covered. Now, from what Donya just said, maybe it wouldn't have been something that would have been covered a lot, maybe just the once. But yeah, especially because of the way the networks took that episode with the kiss, meant that he had to sort of tread lightly with doing other things along those lines without it being cancelled, because they're always fighting to get the next series anyway.
It's a different era as well. I mean,
and
the 60s is a lot different to now.
Yeah, very much so. But yeah, back then they really had to sort of tread lightly.
I mean, when was Stonewall? Was that the 70s? The Stonewall riots? Was that the 70s?
I think it was.
I think it was the 70s, weren't it? So you're talking a good, 10 years after TOS, basically, that the Stonewall riots occurred. So, Gene Roddenberry trying to get like a homosexual character into prime time science fiction show in the 60s, given what was going on at the time. Yeah, he had no hope. The studio would have just says, "You want to do what now?" Yeah, that's not going to happen. No.
It was June 1969. There was
Stonewall.
The police raid on the Stonewall Inn.
I thought it was later than that. Oh, right.
But yeah, even so, I think the 60s were definitely not the right time to bring or to put a gay character on TV, because the world wasn't ready for it. The world was still being brought westerns where men were men, and that's the image that Hollywood wanted to show, and that's what people wanted to see. Now, of course, even in the sort of mid 80s, when it was really sort of coming around to people were starting to open up and become openly gay. That was, even then, it was touch and go as to whether you could do it and lose viewers, and that's what it's all about. It's all about it's not about being bold or anything. It's about the fact that you will lose viewers because people didn't want to see that at that time, and that's what TV shows are supposed to do. They're supposed to create lots of viewers and make lots of money. By the time we get into sort of the end of the run of Star Trek, before we then had the hiatus that led into Enterprise, really it was a period of adjustment for the world. Suddenly seeing more and more lesbian and gay interactions on TV, in soap operas and things, which really started to get the ball rolling. When we get to Enterprise, we should have had a gay character then. I think the world was ready for Star Trek to have a gay character in there, and I think they just missed the boat. They dropped the ball, whatever you want to say. But now it is absolutely the right time where they can do it and not lose viewers. In fact, they can increase the viewership by doing it. So it makes it more of an obvious opportunity to get a character in there and reflect real life, as Star Trek always does. So yeah, now is absolutely the right time to get it in, so long as it's done correctly, as long as it's not all about the sex or all about this or all about that. As long as it's done.
No, it doesn't have to be that. It just has to be. If you take the Star Trek Beyond, he's got a picture of his husband on his desk when he's flying the ship. He gets off the ship, his husband's there with his daughter. They say hello and go off.
Yeah, you see, that's exactly right. That's exactly how it should be.
It's just a couple that just happen to be of the same sex.
It's something that just is. It's not the thing.
But do you notice? But do you notice they say, or I say they say that on all the information I've been reading up on it, they say one character will be gay. Where's his partner? Where's her partner? If there's just one character, then where's the other one?
Well, at a starbase near you.
Yeah.
So,
Is it like somebody like the Janeway character where she leaves her husband behind and then goes off, or is it going to be there's going to be a couple on the ship, which would sort of make more sense?
If you think about Enterprise, for instance, a lot of them left people behind. Even when you jump all the way forward to Voyager,
You just need to take a look at modern day navies and armed services when they're deployed on ships and tours. The loved ones are left behind. So just because they're gay doesn't mean they have to be in a relationship on the ship.
No, right, and I've just done a quick Google search. Despite you might find this interesting. The first character on American TV that was gay in a series was Billy Crystal. He played Jody Dallas in a primetime TV series called Soap. So I don't know what Soap is, by the way.
Soap. Confused you will be after this episode of Soap.
So, and that was in 1977. And then you can go further back. Martin Sheen played a gay man in 1972 in a TV movie. So it's not that long after TOS.
Yeah, and Soap was quite a big series as well. So that's fair enough.
Now, go on.
No, sorry, carry on.
Well, I was going to sort of go back a little bit to something Donya was saying about having sort of strong female leads, and was going to say about one of the writers being Kirsten. I had a brain freeze on her last name, Bayer. She has actually continued the Voyager series in the books. So she sort of continued with Janeway and B'Elanna and sort of all these other sort of female strong sort of characters, and sort of kept that going. So it's good to have a good sort of female presence in the writing team as well, because when it's come to a lot of the Star Trek series, we haven't really had a female writer behind many of them.
That's very true. And I mean, as much as you might want to have diversity in front of the camera, because that's where it's going to hit people, like that's what they're going to see, that's what they're visualizing, it's equally as important to have them behind the camera. You know, your directors, your writers, your producers. You know, the more diverse your writing room is, the richer your content will be, because you have so many life experiences playing into that. So it would be great to see a team come together working on Discovery that is going to be as diverse as what we see in front of the camera, because it's a two-step process, you know. It's not just creating jobs that we see on screen in the characters we're introduced to, it's also the people who bring this together. And I mean, I have no doubt that Bryan Fuller will want that kind of team behind him as well.
So the other thing I want to touch before we wrap up is the fact that they've said, because it's going to be on CBS All Access, and they'll be allowed to do things that they couldn't do on mainstream TV. I.e., Fuller's already said, if the ship blows up and someone says, oh shit, that'll be okay. But they're not going to put profanity in just for the sake of putting profanity in.
Yeah.
So, Donya, what do you think being on the network it's going to be on will enable them to do that they couldn't do before?
I mean, I don't know how I feel about profanity necessarily, because it's not something that obviously we're used to with Star Trek, because it's never been anything that they've been able to do before, because they are at the mercy of network television. So being on a streaming service that is subscription, it will open them up to be able to do more. Like, they'll be able to show violence. I guess they wanted to, they could show more sexual content. But again, these aren't necessarily things that I want to see. I also don't think they're things that Fuller will probably push too far either. I mean, aside from, like, Hannibal, which went completely nuts with like the gore and stuff like that. You know, it's not usually his thing. He tailors himself based on the shows that he's doing. CBS All Access gives them the opportunity to do a little bit more than they would be able to on network TV, and it gives them a little bit more flexibility, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to do it. It just means that they've got the freedom to pitch whatever they want, because they don't have to subscribe to the same limitations that network television would require them to like abide by. So it I think mostly CBS All Access just gives them freedom. What they do with that freedom is an entirely different thing. I don't think Fuller's gonna go crazy. That's not really his style. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it completely. I like that they've got the freedom. I don't want it to go crazy though, because I like my Star Trek when it's very much about the people on the ship. I don't want like too much spectacle. I don't want to go too far away.
So as an example then, when we had Enterprise,
yeah,
Tripp and Paul with the Vulcan massage techniques, then there's the scene where she takes her shirt off and he takes his shirt off and so on and so forth. That would be a normal level that you would think, yeah, that's okay. That's still keeping in Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, again, I don't know how I felt about that either. Like, it felt a little bit out of step for Star Trek when it first happened, but
I wouldn't say that much, because like the original series, Kirk's always taking his shirt off and things like that. it just made it a little bit fairer, but still didn't show anything. So,
yeah, but Kirk weren't taking his shirt off to have a Vulcan massage.
Yeah.
He was taking his shirt off for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, he was taking his shirt off for all sorts of, but it wasn't like, you didn't have, for instance, you didn't have a female character in TOS from behind who was completely naked. You didn't get that in TOS, Yes, Kirk's shirt came off basically every solitary episode, which is, they even made a joke of it in Star Trek Beyond. I ripped my shirt again.
I love that joke.
I know, that was fantastic.
But, that was just,
but some of the costumes that a lot of the females were wearing, they might as well have been wearing nothing, really.
Yeah, but that was the 60s.
No, but all I'm saying is there's sort of precedents.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking more like, I don't want them to go like Game of Thrones crazy. Like,
yeah.
Oh God, no! HBO Star Trek. God, no. I mean, obviously, if they are on a long voyage, then obviously, relationships are going to happen. That's a given. You've got. I mean, if you take the crew, say the crew's 100 people, and they're on a long voyage. At some point, someone in them 100 people are going to have sex. It's just inevitable. But it doesn't mean it has to be gratuitous sex.
Well, not only that, you just hope it wouldn't be in the first 6 months that they've started the voyage. I mean, that's desperation, surely. Maybe 2 or 3 years into the voyage when they start to feel a little bit lonely. But to be getting into relationships that early on would be a bit wrong.
Well, it depends what age they're there. We've had a crew who have joined in from the age of 17.
That's true. But here's a question for you. How old were each one of you when you first saw Star Trek?
6 or 7.
Steve?
For me, I was probably around 11 when I first saw an episode, but when I first started watching it properly, I was 17.
Okay, Donya?
I was 4 or 5.
Yeah, okay, so I was about 6 or 7. How many 6 or 7-year-olds, 9 or 10 or 11-year-olds are going to be watching this iteration of Star Trek if they make it more adult? Now, that worries me. If they start to go too far with it, if they start to show gratuitous violence or a lot more, maybe not topless, but the sort of Hoshi and T'Pol sort of stuff we got in Enterprise, how many 7 or 8 year olds are going to be able to watch that. The parents are going to say, "Hey, come see Star Trek. There's a great TV series here. You want to get..." As soon as they start saying no, you have to be older. You're going to have to be 14, 15, 16, 17. You've lost a lot of your fans early on, and you got lost a lot of the people that are going to build up to be Star Trek fans in another 10, 15, 20 years, when we would like to see another episode of Star Trek come out, another series of Star Trek come out, to keep this thing going. If you get to 20 years down the line and they're saying, "Well, remember that TV series years ago that used to be called Star Trek?" And we go, "No, I don't remember that. I don't remember seeing that." No, it's gone by then. You've lost your impetus. I mean, the amount of people now that would look back and say Enterprise, "Oh wow, yeah, that was great. That they can't even remember it because they never saw it because they were too young, and by the time they've got round to going back to see it, it's dated."
Yeah.
So you really need to keep it more. I'm not saying make it like TOS where it's just for kids, but you should make it
family friendly.
Family friendly. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, because you want to capture the audience of today for tomorrow.
Exactly.
So right. We could go on about this forever and a day, and I'm sure we could quite easily do a 3, 5, and 7 hour podcast on this. But I'm going to call it there.
I was going to say, should we just go through the bullet points of what has actually been announced?
No, because last time you did bullet points, it added half an hour to the podcast.
I won't do that, honest. Some of this we've gone through. So set in the Prime, not Kelvin timeline. 13 episodes starting in January 2017. There'll be around 7 lead characters. The show's opening scene isn't on a planet or on Earth. Each episode will be a chapter. Within each chapter, there'll be a beginning, middle, and end, although the entire 13 episodes will be one full arc. It's set about a decade before Kirk, and they'll be playing with those sorts of ships and uniforms. It's about an important event in Star Trek backstory that hasn't actually been explored yet. And
Klingon War.
It's not the Romulan War, the Battle of Axanar, or the Kobayashi Maru. The show will have lots of aliens, including reimaginings of some of the existing species. And we've had a photo released of what looks like Andorians. Or at least their antenna anyway.
Let's get Jeffrey Combs back, that's what I say.
That'd be good. The show's lead is a female human, but is not the captain. They will be having a gay character. The lead female character will be a lieutenant commander. So yeah, they're the sort of main bullet points of things that have been said.
All right, and quick answers, and I mean quick answers, like 2 or 3 words. What do you think the event is? I personally think it's a Klingon War. What do you think, Paul?
Could be. I hope not. I don't want to see any more Klingons. I've seen Klingons already. Let's see others. Have Klingons in it by all means, but not as the main people.
What about you, Donya?
I mean, honestly, I think because I did an article where I dove into what I think it could realistically be. I think it's probably going to be most likely to be the aftermath of the 4 Years' War, heading up to the Federation Klingon Cold War. So that kind of comes into the right time frame. But also knowing Bryan Fuller may try and do something with the Tarsus massacre. So, because eugenics is completely in Bryan Fuller's wheelhouse, and that's not too far away from 10 years before Kirk's 5-year mission.
Steve?
I've tried not to think about it too much.
Okay, anyway. He did that last week. I did an episode. This is what do you think about the film in a short, and he went, 1 word. So, Paul, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Furbob1 on the old Twitter. You can also find Sci-Fi Waffle on Twitter, as well as Sci-Fi Waffle .podbean.com, and also find me on 10 Forward on the Trekmate universe.
What day do your podcast come out?
Oh, at the moment, any day you like. Normally on a Friday for 10 Forward and Tuesdays for Sci-Fi Waffle.
Okay, Donya?
You can find me on Twitter, which is at virtual_Don. Or if you are interested in Star Wars, then you can find me at our radio podcast as well. That's also on Twitter, and Resistance Radio Podcast on Facebook. And those episodes typically release on a Sunday. So, and that's every week. But I'm mostly around on my personal Twitter.
And your podcasts are available on most platforms, are they?
Yeah, iTunes, pretty much everything. You can subscribe on iTunes. We've got I think it's PodTrack we're on as well. Pretty much anywhere where you can get a podcast, they're up on there already.
Yeah, I should also point out that Paul's podcasts are on iTunes as well, and most platforms, so you can find them there. So, Steve, where aren't you?
Back in Scotland. Yeah, people can find me at Midnight Shadow 7. That's night spelt NITE and the number 7, and that'll be on most social networks.
Yeah, and how many podcasts you done this week?
Only 4.
Oh, well,
Well, most of them's done at the weekend.
There's not much to do in Scotland, though, is there really?
Yeah. He's down safe now. So. Actually, every time I try and get Kieran McDuff on, he's changing an nappy, so there you go.
Yeah, I had that problem.
So, as always,
find
folks, yeah, there he's like, I talked to him today, and he says, all I seem to be doing is going to work, coming home and changing nappies. So, hey, at least he's helping out. That's the main thing. As always, folks, you can find me on Twitter at CRLMH01 or the official Trek News and Views account, which is Trek News Views on Twitter. You can find Trek FM on every social media platform known to mankind, including Facebook, Twitter, Google, and a plethora of others. Please do contact us if you want to contact us. It's treknewsandviews@gmail.com, or you can catch us on Twitter. I'm on Twitter most days on either one of the two accounts. Just send us a tweet about anything you'd like to add to this, or if there's something you want us to discuss in a future episode, then by all means do let us know. Thanks for listening, thanks for downloading, and if you do listen on iTunes, if you could go and leave us a review. Doesn't matter how many stars it is, just leave us a review, because the more reviews we get, the more notice we get put onto the front page of iTunes, and then more and more people download us. So once again, thanks for listening, thanks for downloading, and we'll speak to you soon.
Previously on Trek.fm, to the journey! He tweets out, like, hey, walking around with my mobile emitter, hashtag blessed. It's just, I'm sure that's what he's doing.
Gosh. Yep, he's taking photos of his holographic non-dinner.
The 602 Club.
And even the book started this way, and I remember reading the book and being like, what the F is going on? Because it's just such a strange scene, this Muggle caretaker in this house making tea, and you're like, what is happening? But really what's being set up is this bookend of Voldemort looming over everything and finally finding a way to return.
Melodic Treks.
But this was the album that when that electric violin shows up right in track 1 there, I literally tilted my head back, smiled, and went, yes.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.